believe the voice doing the weighing is the voice of their best judgment, the part of them that has picked up some wisdom over the years and knows how to apply it when things get hard. What they almost never realize, and what changes the entire shape of a life once it's finally seen clearly, is that the voice they're listening to isn't always who it claims to be. A lot of the time, it's the voice of their own fear. And that fear has spent a lifetime learning how to sound exactly like wisdom. Sit with that for a second, because almost nobody says this out loud. When you're a child and you're afraid, the fear is honest about being fear. A small kid who refuses to swim doesn't put together a careful philosophical argument about why getting in the water is a bad idea. The kid is afraid. The kid knows it. The kid shows it. Somewhere in the long process of growing up, that simple honesty gets trained out of a person. The culture decides fear is a weakness to be managed, that mature adults don't let fear drive their choices, that the mark of someone serious and capable is the ability to act in spite of what they feel. So the fear, which hasn't gone anywhere and isn't going anywhere, does the only thing left to it. It adapts. What it adapts into is far more dangerous than the original honest version. It learns the vocabulary of caution. It studies the rhythm of considered judgment. It memorizes the way thoughtful, responsible people talk about risk and timing and preparation. And it begins to sound on the inside exactly the way those people sound. By the time you're old enough to have something real at stake, the disguise is so good, you can no longer tell the difference between the voice of your fear and the voice of your own reasoning. They sound identical from the inside. They use the same words. They cite the same considerations. They reach conclusions that look to you like the conclusions any sensible person would reach in your situation. And underneath that resemblance, doing the actual work, is a system that isn't interested in your situation at all. It's interested in keeping you exactly where you are, because where you are is what's familiar, and what's familiar is what your fear has decided is safe. Here's why the disguise works, and it's the part most people miss. There's such a thing as real wisdom. There's such a thing as real caution. There are situations in which waiting is the right answer, where the risk really is too large. Situations in which the conditions aren't yet ready, and patience really is the smarter move. Fear knows all of this. Fear has been studying these things for as long as you've been alive. And fear builds its own arguments around these real considerations. It wraps itself around real, legitimate concerns and uses them to deliver a conclusion that has nothing to do with those concerns and everything to do with the avoidance the fear was always going to recommend, regardless of what the situation actually required. The argument sounds reasonable because parts of it are reasonable. The analysis sounds thorough because it's genuinely engaging with real information. The conclusion sounds like wisdom because it's being delivered in wisdom's voice. This is why so many of the biggest decisions in a person's life are quietly made by their fear without the person ever knowing. Not because they were stupid, not because they were weak, not because they were careless, because the system that was deciding for them was wearing a costume good enough to fool the part of them that was supposed to be doing the deciding. They thought they were being careful. They thought they were being responsible. They thought they were waiting for the right moment, or building up the necessary preparation, or weighing the real considerations like the thoughtful adult they had spent so many years becoming. What they were actually doing, in a huge number of those moments, was being managed by something that had decided long before any of the reasoning began that the answer was no, that the answer was wait, that the answer was stay where it's comfortable and let the moment pass and find a way to make peace with the choice the fear had quietly made on their behalf. The first step in any of this changing is recognizing that the voice in your head isn't always who it claims to be. And most people will never take that step because the recognition is too uncomfortable to live with. Fear, once it's learned to speak the language of logic, doesn't make one argument, it makes many. And it cycles through them like a debater who's prepared a response to every possible counter. When one line of reasoning fails to hold the person in place, another shows up immediately, dressed slightly differently, but doing exactly the same job. The specifics shift from person to person and situation to situation. But the architecture is consistent across all of them. And once you can see the architecture, the words start to matter less, because you can see the shape of what's really being said underneath. The argument that comes up most often is the one about timing. It's not the right moment. The conditions aren't aligned yet. There's something that needs to happen first, a certain amount of money saved, a certain skill developed, a certain stability in the surrounding environment. And once that's in place, then the move can finally be made with confidence. This argument is hard to defeat because it isn't foolish on its face. Timing genuinely does matter. Preparation genuinely does matter. There are real differences between better and worse moments to make particular kinds of moves. But fear's version of the timing argument has one feature that gives it away. It's never satisfied. The threshold gets reached and a new threshold appears. The skill gets developed and a new gap is identified. The environment stabilizes and a new uncertainty emerges. Wisdom's timing arguments eventually resolve. Fear's timing arguments are designed never to resolve, because resolution means action, and action is the one thing fear is actively in the business of preventing. The second argument is the argument from inadequacy, the case that the person isn't yet ready, not in terms of timing, but in terms of who they are, what they have, what they've proven they can do. Someone else could do this, the argument acknowledges, but for this particular person, with this particular history and these particular limitations, the bet isn't yet a good one. This argument is effective because it's built on real material. Everyone has limitations. Everyone has things they haven't yet learned. Fear takes those genuine gaps and uses them to build a permanent case against beginning, as though readiness were a destination you could one day reach, rather than a moving standard that always shifts forward at exactly the speed of the person trying to reach it. The honest truth is that the person who waits to feel ready before acting will discover, if they ever stop to look at the pattern, that they've never felt ready for anything significant in their life. The things they did that mattered most were almost always done before they felt ready, in spite of the voice that said they needed more time. The third argument is the argument from consequence. This one identifies the worst plausible outcome of whatever you're considering doing and presents it in vivid detail, as though it were the most likely outcome. It doesn't technically lie. The bad outcome is usually genuinely possible, but it presents an unlikely outcome as though it were the expected one, and it presents the cost of that outcome as though you couldn't survive it. This argument is most effective on people who have actually experienced loss before, because it can point to real history as evidence that bad outcomes are real and devastating. What it carefully leaves out every single time is the evidence of recovery. The proof, also from the person's own life, that they survived those previous bad outcomes, that the failures didn't end them, that even the worst things that have actually happened to them turned out to be things they got through. Fear's consequence arguments always include the downside and always exclude the resilience, because resilience is the one thing that makes the downside survivable. And survivable downsides don't stop people from acting. There's a fourth argument too, and it's the most sophisticated and the most painful to identify, because it turns the person's own values against them. It's the argument from responsibility. Yes, the proposed move might be defensible for someone with no obligations, no dependents, no people counting on them, but you aren't that person. You have responsibilities. Other people are depending on you. The risk that might be acceptable in a different situation isn't acceptable here, because the cost of failure wouldn't fall only on you. This is the cruelest disguise the fear puts on, because the love behind it is real. The responsibilities are real. The desire to protect the people who depend on you is one of the finest things a human being can have. And it isn't fear, but fear has learned to wear it as a coat, to use the language of duty and care as cover for an avoidance that has nothing to do with duty or care, and everything to do with the ordinary terror of stepping into something whose outcome can't be guaranteed in advance. Until you can see the difference between the responsibility you actually carry and the responsibility your fear is using as a costume, the disguise will keep working, and the most important moves of your life will keep being deferred with full justification to a Tuesday that never comes. The cost of fear disguised as logic isn't paid in dramatic failures. It isn't paid in the moments where you took the swing and missed, where the risk was real and the outcome was painful. Those moments hurt, but they have a clean shape to them. They can be examined. They can be learned from. They eventually fold into the larger story of a life that was actually lived. The cost of fear disguised as logic is paid in something far quieter, much harder to point at. The slow, steady accumulation of decisions that were never made. The opportunities that expired while the analysis was still going. The version of your life that existed as a real possibility for a window of time and then, through no single dramatic choice but through 1,000 small reasonable ones, slowly stopped being available. This cost never shows up on a statement anywhere. There's no bill that arrives at the end of the year listing the things you considered and declined and never returned to. There's no clear signal telling you the moment you almost moved on is now closed for good. The cost is invisible by design. And because it's invisible, most people never quite reckon with it directly. They feel it. They sense in some quiet part of themselves that something is off. That there's a gap between where they are and where they could have been. But they can't point to the source of that feeling, because the source isn't any single thing. It's the accumulated weight of all the things that fear talked them out of. One entirely reasonable rationalization at a time, across years that can't be retrieved. Think about how opportunity actually works in a real human life. An opportunity isn't a permanent feature of the landscape. It exists inside a window. And the window has a relationship to time and circumstance that isn't always under anyone's control and isn't always particularly forgiving. There are opportunities available to a person at 35 that are simply less available at 45. Not because the person has gotten less capable, because the world has moved. The conditions have changed. The specific opening that existed for a while has either been filled by someone else or has closed because the moment that created it has passed. There are relationships that exist inside windows of possibility, and they close not through a decision, but through accumulated deferrals, through the slow erosion of being almost ready to do something about it, just not quite yet, until one day it isn't a real possibility anymore, and you can't quite say when it stopped being one. There are versions of a career, a business, a creative life that required a particular season and a particular willingness to act inside that season. And the season passed while fear was still building its case for waiting. Fear, by the way, never tells you when the window closes. It just moves on to the next argument, because the next argument is always available, and the closed window can get used afterward as proof that waiting was the right call. See, it says, you were right to be careful. Look at how things turned out. The opportunity wouldn't have worked anyway. This is the most insidious move fear makes, using the closed door as proof that the analysis was correct, when the analysis was actually what closed the door. The honest reckoning would acknowledge that you'll never know what would have happened, because you never went. And the only thing you can know for certain is that you didn't get to find out. But fear doesn't deal in honest reckonings. It deals in after-the-fact justifications. And it has plenty of them. And they're all plausible enough to live with if you don't look at them too carefully. What gets lost along the way isn't always a specific large opportunity. More often it's the steady erosion of a particular quality in your life. The quality of feeling like you're the author of your own decisions, rather than someone watching them happen. Something subtle but important shifts in a person who has spent years listening to the careful, reasonable voice and following its recommendations. They start to feel, not all at once, but persistently, like a spectator in their own existence. Like they're watching the game from the stands, with a remarkably sophisticated commentary about why entering the field would be unwise. The commentary is always available. The field is still out there. And the gap between the two isn't something they can name precisely or point to in any single moment. But they feel it constantly, in the quiet sense that the life they're living and the life they're capable of are not, and have not been for some time, the same thing. There's a particular kind of regret that goes with this pattern. And it's different from the regret that comes from trying and failing. The regret of failure is hard, but it has an object. It has a specific thing that was tried and didn't work. A specific moment that can be revisited. A specific lesson that can be carried forward into the next attempt. The regret of never having tried is a different animal entirely. It doesn't have a single shape. It doesn't attach to any single decision because there was never a single decision. Only an endless series of completely defensible postponements. None of them individually disastrous. All of them together adding up to a life that was meaningfully smaller than the person who lived it. This is the cost of being reasonable in fear's sense of the word. Not the loud collapse of failure. The slow, polite, entirely justified shrinking of a life that nobody, including the person who lived it, can ever quite point to as having gone wrong, only as having never quite gone anywhere. The most important question in all of this is the one that turns the whole conversation from theory into something useful. How do you actually tell the difference? When the voice in your head is making its case, how do you know whether you're hearing genuine wisdom or fear in a clever disguise? It isn't a simple question. And anyone who tells you they have a quick test that resolves it cleanly is either selling you something or has never seriously tried to answer it for themselves. The difference is real, and it's possible to learn to see it. But it requires a kind of attention to what's happening inside your own head that most people don't naturally develop, and that the conditions of ordinary life don't exactly encourage. The first place to look isn't at the specific argument the voice is making. It's at the pattern over time. Fear disguised as logic has a signature that's almost impossible to see in any single moment. But it becomes very visible if you're willing to look at the larger pattern of your own decisions across years. Because the conclusion fear reaches is consistent. The specific reasoning changes. Different arguments for different situations. Different rationalizations for different opportunities. But the answer it arrives at, again and again, is the same answer. Wait, hold off. Not yet. This isn't the right one. If you look back over 5 years or 10 years and notice that the voice has consistently concluded that the moment wasn't right, that you weren't quite ready, that the risk was just slightly too high, and you notice that this conclusion has been reached under a remarkable variety of circumstances on the basis of arguments that didn't actually have much in common, that pattern is information. Wisdom doesn't have that pattern. Wisdom sometimes says wait and sometimes says go. Wisdom produces different answers in different situations because it's actually responsive to what each situation requires. Fear produces the same answer, dressed in different clothes. And the consistency of the conclusion across genuinely different situations is one of the clearest signals that the reasoning isn't what it claims to be. The second place to look is at the texture of the reasoning while it's happening. There's a quality to genuine deliberation that's different from the quality of fear-driven avoidance. And while it's hard to describe in words, it's possible to learn to feel it from the inside. Genuine wisdom, when it's doing its work, has a kind of steadiness about it. It feels settled, even when the conclusion it produces is uncomfortable. The discomfort of real wisdom is the discomfort of recognizing something difficult and true. Fear's reasoning has a different texture. There's a quality of urgency in it, of subtle desperation, of needing to be convinced of the conclusion before you've even finished thinking it through. There's often, when fear gets to the conclusion it wanted, a wave of relief that's way bigger than what just thinking through a problem normally produces. That relief is worth paying attention to. It's the relief of someone who has just been reassured they don't have to do the thing they were dreading. That kind of relief doesn't show up at the end of a genuinely open question. The third test is what happens when you push back. Take the strongest version of the opposite conclusion you can construct. The most compelling case for moving forward, for taking the risk, for beginning now rather than later. Present that case to yourself as forcefully as you can. Then watch how the voice in your head responds. Wisdom responds to a good counterargument by engaging with it. It updates. It sometimes changes its mind. It doesn't have an investment in any particular outcome, so it has no reason to defend its position against a stronger one. Fear responds differently. It concedes the specific point and then immediately produces another argument for the same conclusion. It introduces new considerations that weren't present before the challenge, each one designed to restore the original verdict. It becomes slightly agitated in a way that genuine reasoning doesn't. The relentlessness of the response, the way the conclusion stays exactly where it was no matter what arguments are brought against it, is itself the evidence. The conclusion was determined before the reasoning began. That's the signature of motivated reasoning. And it's the opposite of really asking yourself the question. A fourth thing worth noticing is the relationship between the voice and your body. Genuine deliberation, even about hard things, tends to leave the body relatively settled. Fear's reasoning, even when it sounds calm and analytical on the surface, often comes with a tightening somewhere, in the chest, in the gut, in the shoulders, in the jaw. The body knows. The body isn't fooled by the disguise, even when the conscious mind is. Learning to notice what your body is doing while you're reasoning is one of the most useful skills you can develop for telling the two apart. Because the body is reporting on the actual emotional state underneath the reasoning. And the actual emotional state is the most reliable signal of which system is really driving. Learning to make these distinctions doesn't happen all at once. And it doesn't happen through thinking about it alone. It happens through the accumulated experience of watching your own mind in action over time. Through developing the habit of not just believing the first reasonable-sounding conclusion that appears, of treating your own most persuasive internal arguments with the same polite skepticism you'd extend to a salesperson making the same arguments at you, of asking not only whether the case sounds good, but whether the case fits the pattern of cases your fear has been making for as long as you can remember. This is the work of someone who has decided to be the author of their own decisions, rather than the recipient of conclusions handed to them by something they never examined. It's slow work. It's uncomfortable work. It requires being wrong about your own motives in a way most people find genuinely difficult to sit with. But it's the work that separates a life lived deliberately from a life that was managed quietly and carefully by a system that was never asked to identify itself. There's a way of making decisions that's available to every person and that almost nobody actually practices. It isn't reckless, it isn't paralyzed, it isn't impulsive, and it isn't endlessly deferred. It's something else, something deliberate in the actual meaning of that word. It's the practice of deciding on purpose. Not just having thoughts and acting on them. Not just weighing factors and arriving at conclusions, but actively choosing to be the author of the choice, rather than the recipient of a verdict that was handed down by something you didn't examine. It begins with one commitment. And the commitment is uncomfortable enough that most people never make it. Before any decision that actually matters gets finalized, you'll make a genuine effort to identify what's actually driving it. Not what you would prefer to be driving it. Not what would sound noble if you described it to someone else. What's actually there, underneath the reasoning, underneath the language, underneath the polished case for why the conclusion in front of you is the only sensible one available. Deciding on purpose requires, first and most uncomfortably, that you name the fear before it gets to name the decision. This means developing the habit of pausing at exactly the moment when a reasonable argument is presenting itself most persuasively. The moment when the case for staying still or holding back or choosing the safer option is at its most coherent and convincing. And asking the question that the argument doesn't want you to ask. Is this wisdom? Or is this fear that has learned to speak in wisdom's voice? It means being willing to actually sit with that question, rather than racing past it to the conclusion. It means looking honestly at what's underneath the reasoning, rather than trusting the reasoning just because it sounds sophisticated. Most people won't pause at this moment. And the reason they won't pause is simple. The pause is unpleasant. The argument is ready. It sounds good. It's much easier to accept it than to interrupt yourself and start questioning the source of it. But the pause is exactly where the practice lives. The pause is what makes the difference between a life that was chosen and a life that was produced by the avoidance of an emotion you never honestly named. A few seconds of internal honesty in the moment before a significant decision goes out the door. That's the entire practice, right there in its most concentrated form. And it's the only thing that interrupts the cycle that runs most people's lives. What this practice produces over time, even when you're applying it imperfectly across many decisions, is something you might call clarity, not certainty, because certainty is rarely actually available in the decisions that genuinely matter. And anyone who waits for certainty before acting will find they've waited their whole life. Clarity is a different thing. Clarity is the state of knowing what you actually value and why you value it. It's the state of understanding what your fear is specifically afraid of, so you can decide for yourself how much weight to give to that fear, rather than letting it set the terms invisibly. It's the state of being able to look at a decision and see it clearly, without an unexamined emotion quietly distorting everything it touches. A person with clarity about a decision still faces real risk. They still face the genuine possibility that things won't work out the way they hoped. But they face it as themselves, as someone who looked at what they were doing and chose it deliberately, who understood what their fear was protesting and decided what to do with the protest, who wasn't surprised to find their own fear in the room because they'd already looked at it directly and chosen what weight to give it. The decisions that come out of that place have a different quality than decisions made under the influence of fear's disguise. And the difference is felt not just in how those decisions turn out, but in what they do to the person making them. When you decide on purpose, when you can honestly say that you looked at the fear, named it, weighed it against what you actually valued, and then chose, the decision becomes yours in a way that a default never can. Even if the outcome doesn't go the way you hoped, the decision itself is something you did, rather than something that happened to you. The accumulated weight of decisions that are genuinely your own is one of the most important things a person can build over the course of a life. And it's built not in the dramatic moments, but in the ordinary ones. In the daily situations where the voice of careful reason is making a very compelling case for staying exactly where you are. And the question is whether you'll pause to examine that case before you accept it. The discipline of naming fear before it names the decision for you isn't something you accomplish once. It's a practice. It's something you get better at through repetition, through the willingness to be honest with yourself in the moments when honesty is most inconvenient, through slowly developing your own internal vocabulary for the difference between wisdom and avoidance, specific to your own patterns, your own characteristic arguments, your own particular version of the disguise that fear has been refining over the entire course of your life. Building that vocabulary, developing that practice, making it as habitual as any other discipline you maintain. That's what it actually looks like to live deliberately. That's what it actually looks like to build a life that was chosen, rather than one that was quietly produced by a voice that figured out long ago that if it sounded reasonable enough, it would never be questioned. It deserves to be questioned. Your life is at stake, not in the dramatic sense, but in the ordinary daily sense of a person who has years ahead of them and a real choice about what to do with those years. Name the fear, then decide, in that order and on purpose.